Turns out he's a major cinephile.
They don't watch enough movies. It's a very simple formula.
And here we go.
What up, guys? Nack Goes to the Movies, Episode 1, Podcast Land. We're doing it. Nick McGann here. Guys, I said to myself, I spend all my quarantine life watching movies, TV shows, TikTok fame, potentially useless now that the app is being canceled. I figured, why not take my talents to podcast land? This is going to be a weekly movie, TV show podcast. New episodes coming out every Friday. And I figured let's start it off with my 2-week binger, start to finish, first time through 108 episodes, American Horror Story. Now, to give you a little context, I used to be absolutely terrified of even the thought of horror. Full-blown, close eyes, ears, movie theater, Halloween's coming, any of those trailers, hell no, did not want to be a part of it. Get that Saw, get that Conjuring, creepy nuns, any of that stuff, get that out of here. Did not want any part of that. It was so bad. I remember as a kid, Pirates of the Caribbean came out, and the idea of some scary little zombie things, no part of it. Was it a Disney movie? Yes. Did I eventually realize that's not at all scary? Yes. But at the time, terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. And I remember it's because I want to say Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead. It was the 2004 zombie movie where they're in the mall. And there's a scene that I think a friend showed me where there's a zombie and there's a blanket over her face and she sits up. And I think that moment I was like, that was my first foray into watching a movie that was scary, and I was absolutely done with it. Years didn't go back to it. I had a friend in college, shout out Evan Pioch, who hooked me up with, it used to threaten me actually to leave Walking Dead on and I'd wake up to it as a fun roommate prank. Watched an episode, it was I think the Herschel Farm season 2 episode where they let all the zombies out of the bar, and I was like, oh, this isn't that bad. From then on, it was, I think in 2015, I tried a Scream movie, and from then it's been a lovely journey into the slasher, horror, thriller, zombie genre. But I needed something new to watch, and I love the 80s slasher genre, so I figured AHS, American Horror Story, is the place to go to get that unnerving horror fix. So I did a nice 2-week stint, just had vacation, figured needed a new show to get back into it, and this is where I decided to start American Horror Story. I knew absolutely nothing about the show except there was a creepy clown and something about Adam Levine getting an arm chopped off. And I should, I guess, said this before those things, but if you have not seen American Horror Story, I'm going to dive into all 9 seasons. So, spoiler alert. Cool, now that's out of the way. What'd I think of it? Well, I feel like I always heard how scary, how gross the series was. Some guy was named Bloodyface, and I thought, no, this isn't for me. There'll be one of those things that I'll never watch. Way too scary. I do end up going into scary movie things thinking, wow, I love an actor. I gotta suck it up for that actor. I did The Mist purely because of Thomas Jane. I think that's probably one of the first examples, but I was like, okay, I like Evan Peters in all the X-Men movies, a lot of the Chanels from the Scream Queen series by the creator of American Horror Story. And I think after I said, you guys may roast me for thinking that it was scary, but after seeing the 2 hits, I figured, well, what's the next level of scary I can do? So I figured a new 1984 had come out. I was gonna watch just that and start there, but I figured if I'm gonna do it, might as well go right in season 1. And honestly, I loved it. I didn't know how I'd think about the anthology series of it. Almost is like a mini series that has loose ties to other seasons. Some are greater than others, but for the most part more subtle hints. And I do love when things are connected. Blame DC Marvel universes for making shared universe things much more of a present day reality that we're almost expecting it now. But I loved it, and you saw the acting chops of having to play sometimes multiple characters in the same season. Not as much horror as you would be be led to believe, especially after the early seasons. There's gore, sure, and unnerving things, but I mean, there were seasons I almost thought it was like heartwarming. I'd be curious if you guys had similar reactions. I'm not desensitized to the scares, that's for gosh darn sure, but maybe, you grow into the things and they're not as scary, and you kind of almost overhype it and it doesn't scare you as much. But let's dive in, as I did, to season 1, the OG season. There were really, true scares galore. Those 2 kids in the basement, and just seeing like the things in the jars, and the 2 kids getting pretty. I mean, you only saw one kid's. You didn't see either kid get attacked. You saw one kid, I think, with the jugular cut, and you saw something go after the other kid, and it was. I mean, between that start, I was like, okay, this I'm feeling it. It's there's some scares involved, and when you look at the season as a whole, I mean, the school shooting scene was absolutely terrifying, and its plausibility horror. Kind of made it such a scary thing. And obviously, going into this knowing that Evan Peters is a part of it, I was absolutely about his character, and obviously making him such a character that you weren't sure what was going on, and then the reveal that he is kind of the big bad, I guess, or one of the big bads of the season. I live on IMDb. I'm sure other cinephiles such as yourselves do as well. But I mean, just seeing some of the actors and actresses that from other things. Zachary Quinto, love him in Heroes. Nosferatu, is okay. I like him, not necessarily as much as the show. Obviously, Kate Mara is great. My first exposure to her was from season 1 of House of Cards. She needs to be in more American Horror Story. That's for damn sure. She was so good at the kind of menacing figure that she played. And I know not every actress is in multiple seasons, but it's kind of surprising to me because she was so good. I kind of have that thing with Zach Quinto too, after only being in a few seasons. I said the Tate reveal, phenomenal to kind of see where it developed. I was kind of having Scream 3 things with that reveal episode of the Dead Fist Club. I know that came out much later. That's a very recent show, and seeing that group, I was like, Dead Fist Club, and I wish they could have said it, but I know that was years later. And just kind of even getting me used to this notion where I think I would have been amiss if I started with season 9 just to get the 80s horror kick of seeing the ghosts live forever notion. So, a character dies and you still kind of see them exist throughout the world, and kind of how you almost see the more growth of characters as they're dead, and obviously those flashbacks do help as well. I would say this is not one of the quote more happy endings. It's kind of like they as a family realize they have a duty with some of the other ghosts to keep people away from this house. I did love seeing, speaking of the Scream TV series, the Sheriff Acosta just at the end. I mean, you would see him again in season 5 as Richard Ramirez for in Hotel, the older version of him. Also, I think it said the whole thing of like, I'd be curious to know how many people think there's actually like good people in any of American Horror Story. So it's almost like the moral is like everyone's a terrible person and get them ruin their lives in some capacity. There's some good people, but for the most part it seems like these characters are all terrible human beings. Also, last little note, as soon as I watched it, I know we talked about Thomas Jane briefly, I for sure thought the guy with the burned face was Thomas Jane. I think it was a haircut, reminded me of his Expanse days. I like Thomas Jane. I think he's a good actor. I love Walking Dead. I like everything that's cast in it, but man, I wonder what could have been if he was Rick Grimes, which I think was one of those rumors that was milling around when they were casting all the people for Walking Dead, and they took a nice chunk from The Mist and put him into the TV show. All right, season true. The moment of truth for me was the thing I was waiting. I knew the Adam Levine arm cutting thing. I was like, how gross is it going to be? But, when you watch enough Halloweens and Screams and zombie movies, and I mean, heck, Game of Thrones is pretty GD gory, and you kind of realize, it wasn't that bad. He lost an arm, it happens to the best of us. So, the mask, I was like waiting for see how gross Bloody Face was. Like the mask thing, it's like they're all that. I was expecting like almost a creature, and the supernatural element really wasn't that. It definitely wasn't in that scene, obviously. Jessica Lange was in season 1 as a mainstay. Sarah Paulson was kind of briefly in season 1, but this was kind of, in my mind, the coming out party for both of them. I didn't really know of Jessica Lange before this. I only really knew about Sarah Paulson from the very good American Crime Story season 1, the O.J. Simpson trial. Looking back, I mean, this is one of the most messed up seasons with just some of the things they put people through, with a lot of the torture scenes, with I mean, the Nazi doctor parts kind of tie into the torture scene. Seeing when you eventually do get the reveal of Zachary Quinto as the OG bloody face, and like it was like the skin lamp thing. That was sort of the like, giving me some Hannibal Lecter vibes. I mean, the abortion with the coat hanger. I don't love anything to do with like possession-y demon stuff. Like, I'm never gonna watch things like Exorcist. This was brief enough where like I noticed it, and who knows, maybe I'd be fine with it. But seeing that devil side of the story was something. As I said, more Zachary Quinto, absolutely great. He is just great at playing these like creepy, scary, serial killery characters. I mean, that was Siler in Heroes for a good chunk of it, you know, when he was going around rearranging, taking out people's brains, and now in this case he's just like taking people's skin for odds and ends housing appliances. The one thing that was a little weird, the alien plot. I get that was sort of our foray into something to do with Kit, who was the Evan Peters character in season 2. There was a lot of different plots going on in season 2. I mean, I loved the devil plot. I loved seeing the angel at times. So kind of, you know, it felt like, okay, there was messed up place, good and bad, and that kind of made sense. The alien part seemed a little thrown in there. I don't think it was such a big part that it would distract you. It was kind of just, it almost felt like it added on that I didn't need. Gotta say, best scene though, I was absolutely like, this is a great show for me. Like, I know I picked right when I saw that dance scene. The Banana Fana Fofana song by Jessica Lange, amazing. Fun fact, the original lyrics do, I'm pretty sure, like 98% sure, does have Nick Nick Bobik Banana Fana Fofik as part of the lyrics, so pretty exciting to see that song. They did not use that in the show. I will say, the part at the end where you see Lana Killer's son, Bloodyface Jr., on the TV show, for me was one of those great moments where you kind of saw him, who's played by, I believe, Dylan McDermott, who is the father in season 1, and she kind of disarms him because you see him later with his mother mother abandonment issues, and she kind of uses that to disarm him, and like with no remorse kills him. And you know, we do get to see Lana Winters a few other times in the show. I mean, what a great like turnaround, mess you up moment. And almost was like part of that scene almost felt replicated a few seasons later, but just seeing that good old vigilante justice, which felt like that becomes a clear part of the trend of the show. I mean, she's probably one of my more favorite recurring characters that is not a part of the Coven storyline. Speaking of the Coven storyline, I think after feeling pretty comfortable with these two, you know, I kind of thought I had a idea of almost a formula of the show. I gotta say, the start of the show, some of the goriest things, like just in the beginning, in the past, the weirdest, grossest parts for me of the first, you know, of my time watching the show so far. I mean, I will say it was weird seeing Evan Peters, A, be very much sidelined, B, in a frat, and like it worked. I just like, you just didn't, Evan Peters just doesn't seem like a frat guy, and I guess because he's the one who we say is the good guy in the frat, that kind of is part of it. I will say I like dark things, like that's kind of the genre, like the messed up stuff, and seeing the revenge scenes against the brutal, like terrible frat guys, phenomenal. With Emma Roberts' character flipping over the bus of, I mean, yeah, you lose Evan Peters' character, but I appreciated that. And then even seeing, I forget there was the daughter in season 1 who's one of the Coven witches in season 3, who's kind of your introduction into the world of the witches, where she, you know, fucks the guy to death. I mean, phenomenal. It's just so messed up, and I was all about that like few things of like revenge stories, which is, revenge stories are a pretty big part of the horror genre. So also loved seeing Queenie from Empire with the human voodoo doll power, phenomenal. I mean, especially, I mean, obviously you get a feel for it, but when you see her at the salon, and the guy from that one company who's trying to hunt down the witches is taking everyone out, and she's like the reason he doesn't, because of her voodoo powers. I mean, phenomenal. And I know people say, oh, it's like the edgy Harry Potter school scene, and like they may say that in a negative way. I think that is an absolute positive way. I think it was a cool setting, having the voodoo tie-in just as magic as a whole. And I will say, quick little divergent part, the little musical number, I mean, ignore the bad rendition phenomenal like little musical hit. But speaking of voodoo stuff, seeing Lance Reddick as Papa Legbun, you do see him a little bit in another season. The voice he does for it, so good. Phenomenal casting. As a fan of Scream Queens prior to this show, seeing Chanel Oberlin, Emma Roberts as kind of a similar role of the mean girl. She wasn't the same character, but seeing her in almost a more serious setting, even though I think Covenant's a little lighthearted compared to the previous 2 seasons for sure. Really interesting to see that, almost jarring a little bit, not in a bad way, but a little jarring to see that in a serious setting. All right, season 4. So if I knew one other thing about American Horror Story before starting and delving into it, it was that there was a scary clown with a weird teeth, mouth, face thing. And I believe season 4 that's one of the first things you see is Twisty the clown messing up some guy and abducting a girl. And do I have a clown phobia? No, I have 3 phobias and clown's not one of them, and 2 of them are irrational. But it doesn't mean I love seeing creepy clowns. I was a little nervous to go into season 4. I didn't know if I was going to enjoy it as much. I didn't really know what to expect, but seeing Sarah Paulson have to play 2 twin conjoined sisters, the acting chops on that, phenomenal. And seeing that Evan Peters took a bit to the sideline for season 3, I'd obviously enjoyed seeing him more in the forefront. Really have grown to appreciate Evan Peters' acting chops as we've gone through the seasons of American Horror Story. Obviously, I didn't know it at the time, but you kind of figured the Power 3, Sarah Paulson, Evan Peters, Jessica Lange, were kind of the big 3 that were going to be the American Horror Story staple. And it was kind of weird seeing almost the end of the Jessica Lange era with the show with this. And I kind of like how, maybe unintentionally, how her storyline does eventually end. How it almost feels like riding off not into the sunset, into a variant of the afterlife, which AHS is quite known for, but it does kind of feel like it's almost a swan song for her. She really got a chance to do a lot of lovely singing, which was great. First real character crossover from season 2, seeing the character Pepper from Asylum in here, and seeing her at a previous time in her life, and it almost made you see more growth and the deeper storyline with her character, because you see her in Asylum, not that she's a main character by anything, but especially those flashback episodes where you see her pre the carnival, post the carnival, and then of course how she ends up at Asylum, and it's such a beautiful arc that you kind of get a full scope of. I know she is one of the characters that in Asylum gets indoctrinated by the aliens, and she develops a different sense of sentience, however you want to describe what happens to her. But I did love the full story. 4 was weirdly heartwarming, and it does have one of the scariest characters in Twisty the Clown, and the redemption arc even there is so good. You kind of see how his life fell apart and how he became where he was. It goes to show the scary clown thing has, there's this notion that clowns used to be this jovial profession, and now it's kind of a scary, they're either like creepy or they're terrifying, and there's no like just a nice, good old happy-go-lucky, non-threatening clown anymore. And obviously the interesting transition that they went for was Twisty's not all that, he's bad, but there's a reason, and Dandy Mott, who is the spoiled rich guy, kind of takes over and becomes more messed up because he's like a terrible person. The twist is good. I see what they're doing with it. And another shooting scene where he goes and shoots up everyone at the carnival. It's scary, and he's like a scary character, but you almost wish there was more of a full season Twisty the Clown arc, because that character was so good, especially with the development. Also, strange shout out to Neil Patrick Harris. I think he was in there for maybe 2-3 episodes. Do I love Neil Patrick Harris? Absolutely. Was his character kind of weird? Absolutely. It's kind of like there's a Batman villain. I think it's the puppet's Scarface, maybe, and like the puppet controls him, and this kind of reminded me of that a little bit. Yeah, it almost felt like Neil Patrick was there to like mix some stuff up and kill off Emma Roberts with a very gruesome saw in the box, not magic trick scene, pre the freak show shooting out scene. And just like other seasons, this is absolutely one of those good old vigilante justice scenes where the few characters that make it out alive do end up finding a way to kill and watch the show of killing of Dandy Moth. Not a bad season, and weirdly probably the most heartwarming one up to that point, but interesting. And it was the first time they did add a different hint to the theme song to try to make things match up a little bit with the theme they were going with. Season 5, Gaga season, man. Hell yes. Obviously, I'm sure everyone knows Lady Gaga's acting chops from Stars Born, right? Darling film that came out that everyone loves. Music, it's a big thing. I'm sure we could do a whole season of the show just talking about A Star Is Born and how much people love it. So, probably the most messed up scene in New Girl in American Horror Story, with New Girl's own Max Greenfield, with the demon character that kind of gets explained with the like a drill bit dildo scene. I mean, it's messed up. It's a messed up. I mean, and I don't know if I fully grasped what was happening when I first saw it, but man, is it the most messed up thing that probably happens in American Horror Story. I don't know. There's it's like playing a game. Oh, the 10 most messed up things that happen in American Horror Story. But this has got to be up there. I think seeing the guy, the baddie, the main character who becomes the baddie, spoiler alert, from Ghost Rider, the guy who Seneca Crane, Wes Bentley, was a bit of a surprise. You know, you're kind of used to seeing a cast of characters that you're used to as the main characters. I mean, look, he's great as Seneca Crane, and Ghost Rider is... Look, I own it on DVD. Is it a good movie? No. Is it one of Nicolas Cage's, 2 best movies? No. Does Wes Bentley have some brutal dialogue? Yes. I do think Seneca Crane, he's great. So, I live on IMDb when I watch the show, trying to figure out, I recognize that voice, that, look, who is this guy? And I'm like, oh, it's the guy who's like, we are many. It's Ghost Rider's a rough movie. Probably don't watch it. All right, so for being one of the most gory scenes, I guess, did I marathon through these and maybe not process everything that happened? Yeah, and there's some gore and things happen, but it kind of felt like, ever since season 2, everything is a little lighter, a little more fun, which is it's nothing wrong with it. I mean, look, vampires, different. I mean, you got to mix up it. Everything can't be ghosts. You have to change your supernatural characters, and maybe vampires was a little weird touch, but I mean, every time that I saw Lady Gaga, it didn't really matter what she was doing. I'm just yes, queen. The vampire school scene where they save the one kid who has smallpox. I don't really remember. He had some disease, and they save him, and then he goes and vampires up the rest of the school, and it's pretty gruesome. And there's a little kid gang that happens. There's just more messed up things all about it, especially kind of seeing how that group ends up getting wrecked. I mean, American Horror Stories at its best when everything's messed up and terrifying, and just you kind of question the people who wrote it, wow, this is kind of messed up. For me, more. That's what makes this show so good for me. I like my dark and depressing shows. It's what it is. Kind of seeing them go back to the ghost purgatory type thing that kind of had been missing. Always good, because you really get to build with the characters even if they are gone from the living world pretty early. I will say I was a little bit annoyed with the lack of Evan Peters, but when he does finally show up, I thought it was the over-the-top acting style of the 1920s airship guy. Phenomenal. His character was he the most evil character that's ever been on the show? No, but he was up there. You could tell his whole hotel is built as a terrible people's place. So even though you didn't get the full Evan Peters treatment, you did get a nice chunk of Evan Peters, so I appreciated what he was there. I'm sure this was intentional. I mean, American Horror Story is always taking cues from things, be it real life events or from, the genre, some inspiration. And this was kind of the 7 feel. They went with the 10 deadly sins or something along those lines, and seeing the 7 feel was fun. I mean, even from the beginning scene, that is a reference to something that does happen in 7 at probably halfway through the movie, with the dildo that is a weaponized dildo or something along those lines. I know I did like the twist. American Horror Story always loves to have the twist. You don't know what's going to happen next. And seeing Wes as kind of the bad guy once again, and seeing that he's the guy committing all the crimes. I will say, did I love the killer dinner scene? Yes, absolutely. They did, however, two characters, specifically Ramirez and the Zodiac Killer, that you see and you kind of question some plot holes potentially. But I guess that's one of the interesting things that you don't notice at the time, but as you watch other seasons, you wonder if they're selling. But with at least one more season happening and potentially 3 more seasons renewed, they definitely have time to address things if needed. Season 6, Roanoke. This was probably a season I had absolutely no clue about anything. I knew, Gaga, Clown, Asylum, you kind of have an idea. Roanoke, what is Roanoke about? Is it something with colonially people? And that's probably the extent of my knowledge. This was probably the first time I watched the season and didn't really get it to start. It was a different storytelling style of, a reality show story. It was kind of explained in writing, obviously. They always have in the beginning of the episodes this season, based on true events kind of warning, as if you're watching a true crime story. So it was weird. It was kind of the story within a story oddity that they were going with. And for me, I think the gross thing in the show was the very visible disembowelment scenes. I thought they were brutal, and some of the goriest things, except for the season 3 Madame Delphine Lalaurie beginning scenes, where the disembowelment scenes were very visceral and visible and not necessarily about it. Don't get me wrong, I love me some Cuba Gooding Jr. scenes, especially after his phenomenal portrayal of O.J. Simpson for the FX version of that, not the ESPN one. I just didn't get the style of filming, the storytelling, and the other parts of the first half. It was fine. I didn't get it. I'll be curious because, I think for me, watching something in the horror, thriller, slasher genre, especially where there's a bad guy and you kind of learn it, when you rewatch it the second time is almost as important as the first, because you kind of know what's going to happen and you can see kind of if you can catch any subtle hints of the things happening now that you know more about how the end game results in this. But we'll see. I'll be curious to see how Watch Through 2 eventually goes with this. I think also there were just so many evil factions to keep track of between the villagers and the crazy redneck family. I don't even remember. I know Lady Gaga was supposed to be in this and there was a quick cameo Coven reference. She was there. I missed it completely. Who knows how? I don't know. This was a weird watch for me this season. But I said, you know what? I am on season 6 and I know I'm supposed to be very excited for season 8. I cannot wait for season 9, and I'm absolutely curious about season 7, living in the time that we are living. So I said power through, make it through, and let's see what happens. Get through the second half and we'll get on to the better season. But man, seeing the context of the TV production behind the scenes stuff, that is my industry. And I always love that, kind of seeing that side of things in film. Is Scream 3 kind of the weirder of the Scream movies? Yes, but I always enjoy the sound stage show within a show things. I always love that stuff. Ergo, Dead Set, or the recent, pretty much the exact same thing that Netflix just put out. I want to say it's Brazilian TV show. The name is eluding me, but in essence, it's Dead Set plus more things that happen after the end of the original UK version of Dead Set. So, just kind of seeing the ghost story behind the scenes things, seeing the news coverage of it. Oh man, it was just fun and different and weird, and I was absolutely in it. And seeing the little subtle hints of, wow, something's wrong, no one's gonna leave. Well, the one lady left and it did not work out for her very well, with the subtle nod to the piggy man from season 1, who seemed probably a little random. They had to have some people for Ben Harmon to see therapy patients. It was kind of look, everything's a reference, right? The piggy man is clearly a reference to the Candyman look in the mirror and say the name a few times thing. And obviously Evan Peters was kind of in the first half, and seeing him as one of the few actors who came back to the house that wasn't one of the main 3 people, absolutely fun. I like Evan Peters in this show. There's nothing that, I will say. Like, it's just a fact. But just waiting, you're seeing all the setup and just waiting for things to go wrong. But yeah, my brief Evan Peters fix is satiated in the second half, and I just seeing the true fun horror story reality TV stuff. They have a ghost show reference. Obviously, the people questioning if she killed her brother, and then kind of seeing the two sets of actors. Like, it was like a fun reality horror show in the second half, and I don't know if I would have appreciated it as much, obviously, without the first half, but it just was such a different style of storytelling in the first half that I wasn't used to. I will say, I get it, but did not need to see the part 2 of another disembowelment up close scene. I mean, the scene and how just nothing works out for anyone, and I mean, even that part where they, like, spike the people alive and burn them, like, wow, this stuff is messed up. It was just a lot. Did I obviously appreciate another Lana Winters hit? Absolutely. But, I mean, the big thing of this is, there were just a lot of floating elements happening. I'll be so curious what a watch through of this the second time will do, if I'll have a different opinion, especially knowing what the second half's fun brings to it. All right, season 7. First off, I was pissed. I was pissed because I saw Twisty again, and I said, no. The arc was so good. Why is he bad again? I didn't like it at all. Thankfully, it was one of those, reference to him in fiction things, and, it's always the fun of, well, what seasons are connected to what seasons, and what things are in what world, be it the real world or the fiction world, who knows. But yeah, did not love the Twisty reference to start. Thankfully, they left his story alone, and it was just a comic book, seemingly. That's what I'll go with. Because this was the one season without any supernatural horror elements. And, I mean, you probably can be like, that's fine, because the season was scary enough without anything extra. I mean, with the political climate existing, and just, I think watching it when you're in this divisive climate with it being close to the election, I'm sure it was the same thing when it came out, watching it right after the 2016 election, with watching it being really close to the 2020 election. I mean, it brings horror to the real world, which has to make it one of the scarier things yet, in the same vein of why the school shooting, and even the circus shooting are terrifying scenes. Because, I mean, look, I didn't say this in the first one, but there is this joke about how in the circus scene, the fact that he has the magical gun that he never has to really reload is a wild thing, but divergent. But in the same way that you probably would watch Halloween and think that's scarier than Friday the 13th, because how often are you going to some camp? And let's be real, how often are you going to the camp that you've had 8-9 stories of mass murder? What idiot's gonna be like, yeah, we'll open up Camp Crystal Lake, maybe we'll rename it something differently, but oh yeah, I remember when they died and they died and they died and they died and they died, but like, we'll be fine. That was all a joke or a scary story. Come on. Where in Halloween, there are scenes that are in the real world, and there's, one, I mean, look, there's the New York thing. There's the Friday the 13th, Jason Goes to Hell, where, they take place outside of the camp. So there are a few like that. And obviously in the start of the second movie, which is your first real experience at Jason Voorhees as you're used to, where he clearly goes to someone's house. But Halloween's all that. And I'm sure that's why people would say, let's watch a scary movie. They would probably go to Halloween, the earlier ones, as opposed to any Friday the 13th, even though I love them both. But Billy Eichner, phenomenal. Not the most important character in the season, but gosh, is he an amazing part of the show. Every time he's in it, absolutely phenomenal. I don't know if it's just you just don't know what to expect when you see certain people come in. I mean, I don't know necessarily his full acting career. You're so used to his, on the street interview show that it's weird seeing him in an acting role. But I mean, look, I just watched it. Oh, that's fun. It's Billy Eichner. Phenomenal. And also great to introduce another Scream Queen alum, in Chanel number 3 and Billy Lord. So this was kind of a, not that Billy Eichner is a staple of AHS, but I would say Billy Lord is definitely becoming that kind of the newer group of AHS big players, with Emma Roberts as well. I guess the season just kept you guessing, what was going to happen and just how messed up things could be. Evan Peters is probably at his most messed up since season 1 as Tate in his, Kai character, the blue-haired ponytailed guy who has a gang of killer clowns doing all sorts of misdeeds. Just the psychological horror, the strange, finding a way to rile up two different political sides to get riled up and his rise to power. Is it, very local? Yes. It's so messed up, and in the best kind of, American Horror Story way. I will say, obviously, I enjoyed the end, another news style vigilante justice killing. I expected Lana Winters to be in this season. They mention her, but she's definitely not in it. This was just a good, isolated, not really related to a lot of other seasons, messed up season. I will say this is one of the 2 times where that confusion from season 5 is brought up, because there's a question of who the Zodiac Killer is, and obviously we do not know, and this season brings some questions of if it's Lena Dunham's 1 episode arc, if she is the serial killer, the Zodiac Killer, and we just don't know. And gosh, it was just such a messed up season. And was it a little weird sometimes seeing the one wife and the 2 lady couple was a part of it, and then when her wife joins, it almost felt a little unrealistic, and it was fine. That's probably the only thing is you almost were a little questioning it, the reality of if this is feasible. But it was fun. It was a messed up fun season that didn't need the supernatural elements to be that scary. All right, Apocalypse, season 8, the one that everyone talks about as the big coming together of everything. So obviously, get it out of the way, more Billy Eichner, always a good time. Is he in it very briefly in the beginning? Yes, and we see him later on. Always good time. I kind of like the apocalypse setting. I wasn't really sure where they were going to go with it long term. You're kind of not really knowing what was coming. That, how are they going to use this for a whole season, especially when they pretty quickly killed everyone off. But when that Coven musical theme hit and seeing, the witches come back from season 3, I was like, hell yes, let's go. I was all about it. You were obviously a little confused when you saw certain people you thought were dead back. They did spend a fair amount of time in this season in the past. I think, maybe 3 episodes in, they did the jump back. I mean, this was the endgame variant season of AHS with tons of characters from different season, the best characters of season 3, a fun trip back to the house of season 1, and the characters in the house in season 1. I mean, it's the first time you see the husband again. Obviously, his actor has been in a few seasons. The wife, I think, has only actually been in that 1 season, and as that character only in Apocalypse again. But you kind of get to finally see that, after the ultrasound pass out of this messed up child growing up inside her, you finally get to see, who this baby is, and then you see, lo and behold, Antichrist. I don't know if anyone knew of just how important Coven was going to be. Obviously, there was a Queenie reference in season 5 of Hotel, and just kind of building on the lore of the Coven world with a whole different school of warlocks, and we get B.D. Wong, who is just generally good in everything he is in, be it his brief Jurassic World thing to obviously Mr. Robot. You just enjoy seeing an actor that already as one of the members of the Warlock School. And I love connected seasons, and obviously other ones were, more sparse connections or references, but, bringing Billy together with Emma Roberts and together in the Coven school, so you're kind of like the Chanels are back in the Coven school world. Just fun. Just a fun season, and the build up to this epic conclusion that you kind of see the end, you build up to it, and then you finally see how it actually ends. Also, Gotta throw it out there. Shout out to the two Silicon Valley nerds played by Billy Eichner and Evan Peters. Was it random? Yes. Did I love the strangeness of them playing these two characters? Absolutely. And obviously the subtle Evan Peters nod of trying to be president not working out was a great reference to Cult season. Just fun, and the stakes were so high, and it was Coven Part 2, and there's some other just crazy things going on. Phenomenal. So season 9, speaking of fun, the whole reason I decided to watch American Horror Story, obviously I said I considered just starting with season 9 1984 because of the 80s slasher fan in me. It's my ish, and I gotta get it. Obviously, we've had it already in season 8. Season 9, more Scream Queen reunions, gotta say, always love it. This was one of the weird season that didn't have Jessica Lange, Sarah Paulson, Evan Peters. You kind of felt it. Evan Peters, we saw him in as a frat guy for a little bit in season 3. I don't really know who he could have been in this season. Maybe he could have been another counselor or something, but I don't know. I don't know who he could have been, but I definitely could have seen Sarah Paulson as Margaret Booth, the counselor who, spoiler alert, was look, there were a lot of killers, but she was definitely one of the killers. So I would have been curious to see Sarah Paulson play that role, but it was fine. You could have seen her in that. Matthew Morrison, Glee mainstay as a BDB, Big Dick Boy, hilarious, phenomenal mustache, and it was. All the counselors kind of had the, just the fun vibes, right? It wasn't exactly like a Breakfast Club social stereotype groups, and they all were messed up in some way. I don't know if Matthew Morrison's character was everyone had something bad in their past. I don't know if he had anything super bad, but I guess his end story, with Margaret Booth maybe had a little bit in there. Best theme of the main themes by far, obviously the Coven musical hit is good, but easily the best musical variant of the theme. The intro was great. It was just so synthy and 80s. It was phenomenal. If I was to have one of these songs as like a ringtone or something, one of these themes, it would easily be that one. The plot twists were great. They almost doubled down on who's the killer, oh, that's the killer. And it took a while to figure who the actual killer was. It's Mr. Jingles, it's Margaret Booth, it's actually the ghost whispering of Mr. Jingles' mom into Margaret Booth's ear to make her the killer. She never really gets her due justice, but I guess you lose a kid, that's fine. We can make the bad person Margaret Booth, and maybe she was bad before. Who knows? Just the 80s genre was so good, though. Obviously, the season harkened back to the whole ghost purgatory type thing, which you were missing for at least a season or two. You had it briefly back in 8, just going to Murder House, but as in the full season kind of ghost purgatory scene was fun to have back. And just all the dance scenes, man, phenomenally fun with the jazzercise scenes. It was a little weird coming from, the high stakes of the world ending, apocalypse, to kind of this self-contained summer camp hoo-ha thing going on. But it just, I can only say it so much. It was just fun season, that's for damn sure. So that's it, folks. 9 seasons done, but we're not done yet, because let's talk about the future of American Horror Story. When you look at the casting list, good news. The big ones, Sarah Paulson, Evan Peters are back. No word on Jessica Lange, and no Emma Roberts, which is a little strange because you kind of used to her being the staple of the newer generation of AHS alums. But it's always good to mix in some people and come back. But a lot of the staple actors and actresses are back. There's always going to be, a few oddball choices to new faces to the genre, and Macaulay Culkin definitely feels like it comes out of nowhere. Obviously, Home Alone guy, kid. I honestly can't name another thing he's in. There's rumors of a very interesting sex scene with him and Sarah Paulson, so you'll just be curious. Well, we don't really know the setting yet. I think there was something with water. Heck, maybe it could be like an island thing, and then there were none, or Harper's Island, something like that. I don't really know if that's a genre that's enough, or a saying that's enough for American Horror Story, but that's kind of only thoughts I have from seeing, I think, brief artwork. We'll see. If it's one more season, obviously COVID has really challenged the production landscape, as every, element of the world these days. But I will be curious to see if they, what other directions they'll go. There is obviously rumors of another Coven season or Coven related season, which obviously we can always appreciate. But 9 seasons done, having watched them in a rapid succession in a short amount of time, not trying to speed through anything, but having I think a fair grasp on it. Here is what I would consider the rankings of all the seasons from worst to best. As you can probably imagine, number 9 for me is Roanoke. Look, the story structure was weird. It picked it up in the second. I didn't really know what to do past that. Freak Show is for me number 8, because as much as I enjoyed Twisty, I just don't know if the dandy villain swap out for me was the thing to do it. And it just was some strange story stuff with Neil Patrick Harris barely being in there. I just didn't necessarily get it, although I did love seeing the final full season of Jessica Lange. So I had a bit of a tough one with picking between Hotel and Cult, and part of me initially was like, well, between Freak Show and Hotel, what was I gonna pick, because they kind of had, for me, that, the feel-good versions of American Horror Story a little bit. So I went with Hotel at 7 and Cult at 6, and I chose this because Hotel is, it's feel-goody, a little more feel-goody than Freak Show. Obviously, I like Lady Gaga, and I did enjoy the brief Evan Peters role a lot, but I think Cult is just so scary and realistic-ish, compared to other seasons of American Horror Story, that you kind of have to put it up above Hotel. So I got Hotel 7, Cult 6. Cult definitely, scary and good, and then, our first experience with Billy. But I will say good, but that kind of is I have tiers, I guess, right? Tier 1, Tier 2, and I think Cult, Hotel, Freak Show, and Roanoke are Tier 2, where 1 to 5 I kind of consider that Tier 1 group. So another tough one. I think 1 and 2 for me are like solid, wouldn't change. 3, 4, and 5, it's tough because you almost have Coven Season 1 and Coven Season 2. So I said Coven is great. Love the setting, love the witches and everything like that. And I left Coven at 5. I love 1984. I wasn't going to put both Coven seasons above that, so I kept 1984 at 4 because, look, 80 slasher is my stuff. Am I biased? Absolutely. But that's it's my personal rankings. You can disagree or agree, and I'd love to hear your feedback after I put out this episode and this list. I'll put the list separate up on Twitter so you can really see it and compare and contrast. But I ended up putting Apocalypse 3, and I know that's a not necessarily everyone's favorite opinion, because I don't think everyone loves the first few episodes of Apocalypse, and really we're here for Coven Part 2. And yes, do I like Apocalypse purely sometimes based on the Coven characters that were developed and introduced in Season 3? Of course. Of course that's going to be the case. But the stakes are higher. There's more of the world developed. I obviously appreciate the Warlock School elements and seeing the Antichrist storyline and how that weaves its way into both the wizarding schools. So I went Apocalypse 3. And I'm sure the 1 and 2 are, I can't imagine there's a whole lot of complaints, or this is probably the coldest take in the world. But you gotta, in my mind, go Asylum 2, Murder House 1. Murder House, the OG season, by far the scariest season. Both these are probably the 2 outright horror seasons as opposed to more gore and ambiance scares. Asylum, things are so messed up. You're barely in the modern day story. I think you're in it the right amount. And look, the dance scene is so good in Asylum. The alien thing for me is really what put 2 behind 1, because I love the devil's angel dichotomy. I love the messed up setting in the Asylum, the creepy science experiment stuff. But obviously you got to go Season 1 for Murder House, just because it obviously defined the season. There's so many trends from Murder House were be a part of American Horror Story after the fact, and you just kind of builds on itself, and it just does so good. I mean, is it weird that Sarah Paulson's barely in it. Yeah, I mean, I'd say that's the only sad thing in Murder House, but she does, obviously, as anyone can tell, she's in every season but one, get her chance to shine and develop as one of the two mainstays of American Horror Story. But all right, guys, that is one season, one episode in the books covering 9 seasons of American Horror Story. We did it. One episode. Check that out, guys. Check that off the box. But you know what you guys can also do is check me out on my personal and on the show's social media channels. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, be it me, be it the show. There'll be lots of fun multimedia content to check out, and we'll do some ranking lists, we'll do some recaps, we'll do just a bunch of other things to keep you entertained, satiate your palate until the next episode. And we will be putting out new episodes, full-on podcast episodes, every Friday. So make sure to check that out. We will eventually figure out a time to post these, but I'm new to the podcast game. I don't know what time I'm going to post this one yet, but we'll get there. We'll get you guys covered with all of your movie, TV show, and just fun old entertainment news. This is your one-stop shop for all of that. Peace.
Are you not entertained? I think this is going to be the beginning of a beautiful friendship. I don't like goodbyes. Let's just call this see you later, alligator.